So, hello and welcome to another exciting edition of the Extreme Improv podcast. My name is David Pustansky and I'm your host. And today I am joined by not one but two guests. And they are from Indianapolis in Indiana in the United States. And we are joined by Josh Demaree and Don Marter. How are you doing, guys?
Doing well.
I'd say we're doing all right.
Yeah, we'll see how the kids who are apparently trying to murder each other in the background are going to go here in a bit. But
okay, so just in case we do hear this throughout the podcast, who is in the background and who's murdering who?
Probably my boys. I've got three sons, Joseph, Daniel, and Samuel, and they're hanging out with Josh's eldest child, Maggie, and they're all hanging out watching movies right now.
At least they should be.
They should be, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, what are they watching?
The Incredibles 2.
Ah, I've not seen that yet. Didn't like the first one that much. When it came out, I thought it was just too serious for a Pixar film. I probably like it more now, but I just wasn't ready for it at the time.
The second one takes a much better comedic approach, particularly when it comes to the father-son relationship with the baby who apparently has a bunch of new powers.
Okay, so there's our first recommendation of the day. Check out The Incredibles 2. So, guys, this is the Extreme Improv podcast, and we'll start by talking a little bit about things improv. So, if I have understood this correct, you're part of a group called Breakfast Anytime Improv. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, and what can you tell us about Breakfast Anytime Improv?
Well, of the members of Breakfast Anytime, I think Josh and I are probably the longest standing members. We might have a couple others that do a couple other activities with our group that started at day one, thinking of Christina and a couple of other people. But Breakfast Anytime Improv was basically birthed out of a small group of improv and up-and-coming like voice acting and regular acting students by a gentleman named Peter Spellos. He's our director and longtime actor from L.A. He's from New York. He lived in L.A., I believe, 20 years, has done improv acting, voiceover acting, live-action movies and TV shows for 40 years or so, 30 years, something like that. And wow. He was asked to guest at a pop culture convention here in Indianapolis and came, and through the connection with that convention, they actually asked if he'd be interested in hosting an improv class. And he said sure, if it kind of basically maintained and paid for itself. The first class, I believe we had 15, somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 18 people. And when there was interest shown to continue, that turned into what has now been a 4-year venture into the life of an acting performer and improv performer. And Breakfast Anytime was the performance company that was actually birthed from that initial group and continuing classes.
You've done a good job of keeping track of all of this.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, it sounds detailed. It's like your Wikipedia article.
Well,
So, okay, so the interesting thing, I always find it fascinating with all the different improv groups, how did the name Breakfast Anytime come up for the name of the group?
So, I remember this conversation. I think we were at like dinner right after one of the workshops or something along those lines, probably third or fourth workshop, and somebody was trying to determine where we were going to go for dinner or whatever. It was like, I love breakfast. I love Breakfast Anytime. And I think Peter looked over and goes, that sounds like the name of an improv group. I'm like, well, why didn't it just be the name of our improv group?
Yeah.
And then it became the name of our improv group.
Yeah. And I think he made the comment that he always kind of wanted to name an improv group, either Breakfast Anytime or something having to do with the likes of that. So,
dinner sometimes. I think
dinner. Yeah. Breakfast anytime, dinner occasionally. Yeah.
Love it. Okay, and what kind of shows do you guys do? Is there a particular format? Do you do different formats, short form, long form?
Right now we're primarily short form. We do have a lot of people in our group that have experience with some of the other long form groups here in Indianapolis, but we kind of focus more on a short form, but it's kind of the way Peter directs things is he has kind of a standard set list that we've done for the last probably year of games, throwing in a couple different things, because for the last year we've performed 7 or 8 times, I think, or is it less? I don't remember. We've been doing a lot of local conventions, and we tried to gear some of those games and some of the ideas behind those games towards the convention. So, like, if we're at a sci-fi convention, we'll do sci-fi themed suggestions and stuff. Or if we're at a gaming convention, we'll kind of gear the suggestions more towards the convention. But for the most part, it's 7 to 12, depending on how long the set is. 7 to 12 short form games, and then 45 to hour and a half long set, depending on where we're at.
Yeah.
Cool. And what are some of the games you guys play?
We do a lot of games that focus on rhyming, or we actually just started doing a really fun game that was kind of designed or developed or played around with when Peter, our director, went over to he goes over to London twice a year. So he was there this last spring, and they started playing around with this. Oh no, it was in August when he went. So he goes. Peter is at least this year and in some previous years has been a featured guest at TF Nation over in London, and he's voiced some Transformer characters before in a couple of animated series. But in general, he was, I think, on a car ride or something with one of his students, and they started just spouting limericks. You know, there once was a man from Toronto, and then just kind of going on from there, and it ended up turning
What rhymes with Toronto?
Well, you know, what
What a
You put yourself in
That's
that
true.
hole.
That's true. I did.
To better answer your question, David, I actually have a
do you have a
lineup.
set list?
I do.
Oh, okay, great.
I keep emails.
Yeah, I keep emails too.
So
Is that an impression of like a 5-year-old, I hear?
No, that was definitely the impression of a 3-year-old.
3-year-old.
done very well, actually.
Very
Yeah,
authentic.
that's it.
So the games we played at Gen Con, so Gen Con is one of our favorite conventions kind of in general here, and it's a gaming convention. So one of the things we decided to do this year was put ourselves in to perform a show at Gen Con, and our set list was Pro Con, which pitted, it wasn't necessarily competitively, but we put 2 improvers up. One person would take the pro on a subject, the other would take a con. Then we'd flip, and then we move out to the next people. The next, we would then play a game of freeze tag, which 2 people start, and then they do a scene based off a suggestion, and then the back line calls freeze to tag in the performers and start a whole new scene.
Yeah.
Then we do experts, which our experts is an interview style with 3 people in a line.
Multiple heads?
Yep, multiple heads. One word at a time is our experts game. And then gibberish. This is the poetry that he was kind of mentioning. We have a couple of poetry games, but gibberish poetry is the one that Peter really has an affinity for, where there's 2 sets of 2, and one person speaks in gibberish, and the other person is the translator.
Yes.
And then the alphabet game, ABC. I think almost every improv does some form of ABC. Yeah. And then poetry, which is a line of 4, 1 line at a time, where it's A, B, A, B. So first person says a line, second person says a different line, third has to rhyme with 1, fourth has to rhyme with 2. Emotions. It's an emotion selection game where somebody freezes and changes the emotion and the scene continues. Cocktail party. This one is to kind of stretch our voice legs. The cocktail party is somebody will sit down in the center and be hosting some sort of party. At Gen Con, it was an after-hours party was the premise. And then a person would come in with a voice or character, and the person hosting had to mimic that same voice or character. Dr. Seuss is one of our other rhyming games, where we go under the the guise of a Dr. Seuss story. There's two people. First person says a line. The second person rhymes with that line, gives another line, goes back to the first person. They have to rhyme with it and continue on as if we're telling a Dr. Seuss children's story.
Sounds good.
Got Imaginary Friend, where we basically walk up. We're going to a bar, and we run into our imaginary friend from our childhood, based off some sort of suggestion. And the final two were the interview show, where three people each take on some sort of endowment. And for gaming related, I think we did like the failed superheroes or something along those lines.
Superheroes.
And then a person interviews, asks questions, and then the audience asks questions of the characters. And then we ended with movie styles, which two people do a scene. It's another freeze game. The person in the back line pulls a movie style, and then they do a scene based off that movie style. So that was our Gen Con show. And for the most part, that's been our show all year. And I know you added limericks at the Franklin Central show. Yeah.
No, we didn't actually do any limericks. We talked about it for about 4 months.
Oh, we're doing it with the Dick Wolfsey thing coming up soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So it's an interesting concept that you're doing the improv shows at, like you said, was it gaming conventions, and what was the other one, sci-fi conventions, stuff like that? Yeah. How did you get into that kind of circuit of things?
Well, so we've been doing improv for about 4 years. We've been nerds for about our entire lives.
And we've been podcasting for almost 9 years.
Yeah, so Josh and I, in addition to...
You have the connections.
Exactly. Yes. In addition to doing improv acting, we also host a gaming podcast as well that I think we started in 2010? 2011.
Yeah, so it's been 8
and this, just so we get the proper plug in there, this is the Established Facts podcast, isn't it?
That is correct. The Established Facts podcast. Yep.
I was going to come to that in a little while, but since we're there now, let's talk a little bit about that, because it's cool to talk about all kinds of things. And yeah, you're speaking to another nerd. I love gaming. I love video gaming in particular, but all gaming is of interest to me.
Well, that's good. Because we were hoping to cross-post this on the podcast show anyways.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, do. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about the podcast, what kind of things you do on the show, and then we can deep dive into some gaming stuff.
Sure. So our normal format for when we do a recording with the Established Facts, we'll do our casual introduction of everybody at the table, talk a little bit about kind of catch up like we do, in any conversation. The original intent of the podcast was actually a group of us, always playing games together, always hanging out together, and we always found ourselves getting into some sort of heavy discussion about games or a particular game, and we'd talk for hours just about stuff, like you do with people that you are really close with and really passionate for. And so we decided, I wonder if there are people out there that may be interested in some of the content that we are talking about, or maybe they have their own opinions, and let's record it and see if anybody will listen. And we're not the biggest thing in the world, but we have a lot of fun with it. It's been kind of a labor of love for almost 9 years now, and we really just enjoy getting together and talking about what we're passionate about with gaming, or we'll kind of dabble. Josh and I are really big wrestling nerds, so we'll dabble in wrestling every once in a while.
This is a match made in heaven. I would say I'm the biggest wrestling nerd. So
Josh and I are what culture wrestling fans.
Yep.
I used to do some stuff with What Culture when they very first time they were. Or may not have been the very first, but like quite a few years ago. First time they were doing like video content and stuff. I did an interview. There was G.I. Joe 2, the movie out, and I went and interviewed The Rock. And then
very cool.
A few months later, they had opportunity to go out and visit SummerSlam to cover WWE 2K13, I believe it was at the time. And so, I was able to go out there, watch the event, but also just cover the game because they were announcing all of who the playable wrestlers in it were. The great thing from that experience for me was they were introducing the Ultimate Warrior into the video game, and that was his reintroduction back into the WWE. And
great.
Obviously, yeah, he passed away just after the Hall of Fame.
Yep.
And so at this SummerSlam event, when people were in the hotel, it was all hush hush. We had got the word on it, but I looked across and the Ultimate Warrior was there, and they invited us to a special meeting about it called the Ultimate Brunch. And the Ultimate Warrior gave this amazing motivational speech pep talk where everyone came away feeling like they could achieve their dreams. Now, within about 15 minutes, reality hit back in, and everyone had sort of given up on them again.
Like you do. Like
The funny thing is I was just thinking about this the other day, and I'm probably within the end of this podcast of changing our subtitle. We're the Established Facts, a podcast about all things gaming, and I'm real close to adding ... and sometimes wrestling.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, right. So we're going to dot back and forth probably now for the rest of this, just between gaming, wrestling, and improv. So I'll start at the end, though, and since we've skipped over gaming, I will just stick on wrestling for a moment. So, guys, what wrestling are you particularly into now? Who's your favorite wrestler of all time? Some of these sort of topics. Let's learn about each other here.
Okay. Well, I can start with probably my favorite wrestler of all time. I grew up a WCW mark for a long time.
Yeah.
And got into the World Wrestling Federation for during the Attitude Era, and then obviously WWE as they transitioned. But probably from the onset, Sting was one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Just watching him in the ring and how charismatic he was, and it's funny that you bring up the Ultimate Warrior. I did not realize until a lot of his featurettes came out that he and Sting basically
Blade
came up,
Runners.
Yeah, right. They came up together, which I thought was fantastic. I never actually knew that. And then probably if I were to be a little bit more subjective in choosing, Sting is definitely my all-time favorite wrestler. But when I got into WWE, the guys from DX, Shawn Michaels and Triple H and Road Dogg and Billy Gunn, those guys, man, I could watch them for hours. And the fact that Triple H and Shawn Michaels are both running NXT right now, it makes my heart sing. Those guys put on probably the best. I think that ratings-wise, it's one of the best products that WWE puts on. But in general, talent-wise, story-wise, there's not really anything better right now for WWE than NXT, unless you're talking about Bray Wyatt, and then he is pretty much the greatest thing.
Yeah.
Real quick, I have to throw this at you because you probably haven't seen it. Did you see the $6,500 Bray Wyatt Universal title that WWE is trying to sell right now?
The blue one?
No.
Oh, no, I haven't seen it.
It has
Does it have his face on it? Nice.
Oh, $6,500 because it's handmade by the artist.
Of course it is. That's fantastic. There's so many things wrong with that.
So many things.
I saw a picture of it, but I wasn't sure what it was because I hadn't gotten a chance to see the updates or anything like that, and I didn't catch SmackDown.
$6,500. The tax is almost $6,000.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Anyways, so I also was a WCW fan, but I was a WCW. Because of whatever his past aside, I was a Hulkamaniac.
There you go.
From as soon as I saw the first WrestleMania with him, which really hurt my heart the other day to find out I'm born in '85 and actually WrestleMania 1 was in '84.
Yeah,
and I swear
it was WrestleMania. It was '85. It was '85. Yeah,
but it was right before I was born.
There was Wrestling Classic. I think was their first pay-per-view.
Yeah.
So either way, I was born in July, and I think the first WrestleMania was still a spring event, and it was one of those things where you remember it as if it was there from the beginning of your life.
Yes.
But anyway,
I always remember the number of WrestleMania because now that they only do it once a year, it's the same age. Yeah.
So,
well, hang on. Let me just pause you there because, I was born in 1985, and the things I can point to why that was the greatest year that's ever taken place in our history thus far is it was the year of the first WrestleMania. It was the year of the Nintendo Entertainment System's release, at least in that version, not the Famicom.
Yeah.
It was also the year Back to the Future came out. So between those three, I think that's a very strong case for 85.
You
it's
know
okay.
what?
I might
have to give that to you. I was an 84 kid, but that's a lot of really hefty.
Are there any highlights of 84? Because I'll be honest, I've never looked it up.
The Reagan administration, the summer run of Return of the Jedi.
Oh, there you go.
That's probably, in my opinion, that's probably it right there.
For us being a podcast who tries to stay areligious and apolitical, let's stick with the Return of the Jedi.
Dude, I love it. I'm really excited about this. Not to give us a fourth subject matter to talk about, but I'm really excited about what comes out in a couple of weeks.
Anyway,
yeah.
So I was a Hulk Hogan fan and still a Hulk Hogan fan. Whatever has happened, it's happened. Stuff is the way it is. But I went through that whole thing, watched the whole up and down of WCW, whooping on the WWE for those 83 weeks or whatever. And, what got me back into the WWE at the time was actually WrestleMania 14, the one where Austin beat Michaels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with Mike Tyson.
Yeah. I hadn't bought a WWE pay-per-view since probably WrestleMania 8, I think was the last one I saw.
Was 15 the first year of The Rock and Stone Cold?
It was.
That was the first WrestleMania I ever bought and watched.
Okay. Yeah,
so I still remember them hitting each other's finishers 14 times. It was insane.
So I went through all of that, and then I've been watching WWE pretty much since then. But I've always been a mark for the competition.
Yeah.
Only because I know that the result of the Monday Night Wars was that competition gave us a better product.
Yeah.
And when competition doesn't exist, the product suffers. Much like the last few years of WWE's product suffering.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed TNA when they got kicked off or really got started, and then whether for good or ill, when they signed Hulk Hogan, of course I marked up when that happened too.
Yeah.
But we just went, so what is today?
2 weeks ago.
Two weeks ago we went AEW Dynamite was actually in Indianapolis.
Were you there?
We were.
It
was such a good show.
Very good show. And I bought All In. I bought Double or Nothing. I watched all the smaller ones. I bought All Out. I'm a huge fan of what AEW is doing, and whether they last 3 years or 23 years, they are forcing WWE to realize that something needs to change.
Yeah.
And even if
we've got Pyro back.
Yeah, Pyro's back. Pyro's back, and apparently they can call each other wrestlers again.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm a fan of the competition, not because I'm not a fan of the WWE, but because I want to see competition improve both sides of it.
Well, that's why I
completely agree.
I've really enjoyed this Survivor Series storyline with the NXT takeover and the SmackDown. I mean, we always see SmackDown and Raw coming on each other's show, but watching NXT run roughshod over a lot of those guys has made me feel so good about what they're doing because they're their own competition. You know what I mean? Like, you've got guys who are, for better or worse, basically considered in the undercard, and they're going out there and they're putting on matches that are just all-star and 5-star matches. I mean, they're insanely good and insanely talented, and that's what AEW brings, I think, is a different looking. I mean, they kind of play up to some of the old stereotypes of like the hardcore matches and using color, whether it be in language or it be in the actual match, and
but only on pay-per-view.
And that's okay. Like, I think that there's definitely a place for that. Especially when you're talking about like appealing to us, mid 30-somethings when it comes to wrestling, because we remember those good old days of ruthless aggression and Attitude Era and ECW and Tommy Dreamer coming out with a barbed wire covered bat and beating the crap at each other and Cactus Jack and all those guys. And I think there's definitely a place, especially with AEW being able to kind of do their own brand's thing. But I will say, in my opinion, being able to see Kenny Omega live was probably one of my favorite parts of that night on AEW Dark.
My biggest disappointment of AEW thus far is and a lot of people have been saying this. I do feel like they have dropped the ball a little bit with Omega. He doesn't seem as special, and I think for a lot of people who didn't follow New Japan, wouldn't really see why he's so special, because a lot of the guys on AEW do a lot of flashy moves and that kind of style of wrestling, and I don't think they have really pumped him up as that. They if WWE could have got Omega, that would have been like the biggest signing of the year for them. It would have been like when they brought in AJ a couple of years back, and
I agree.
And AEW have him from the get-go, and obviously someone had to lose between Omega and Jericho at Double or Nothing. But from there, it wasn't that, well, Jericho advanced and Omega's coming right back at him, or he's got to go the long way round to get back in the picture. They've gone this losing streak, lack of confidence, and he hasn't quite. I haven't quite seen the personality and the excitement around him that I was hoping to.
Well, if he didn't watch Dark from Indianapolis and Dynamite from this last Wednesday,
who did he wrestle on Dark in Indianapolis? Was that
Jack Evans?
Joey Janela? Oh,
Jack
Evans.
That
was a great match.
Yeah, it was really good.
Very good match, and I think I agree with you that they had an opportunity to really push him. But on the same note, there are only so many spots when they're trying to. They got one TV show, a smaller roster. They got to kind of slot people in, and I agree that I don't think Kenny's kind of found out if he's in mid card or main event yet. But by having him go through the kind of losing streak, now that he's kind of coming back up by beating Jack Evans, by beating Pac, which are two pretty. I mean, Jack's not necessarily as big on the AEW roster, but since he was fighting for the AAA championship, AAA knows who Jack Evans is. Mm-hmm. So by having those two kind of higher profile victories, I'm hoping it kind of gets him into that upper mid card where he can. I like Jericho where he's at. I hate what they did with Cody, but I understand why they did it. But the fact that we're looking at a possible, John Moxley and Chris Jericho feud very soon is very exciting, and you can't have that with Kenny Omega sitting at the top.
Yeah, true. Okay, guys, I'm going to pause the wrestling talk for 1 second, because everyone's going to be listening to this thinking this was the Extreme Improv wrestling podcast, which incidentally, I may as well mention it now. Like, it is a thing. Like, literally, I've been doing the Extreme Improv podcast. This is effectively the second season that I'm now recording episodes for. But along the way, it was always my plan that, well, at some point I'm going to record the wrestling podcast. I'm going to record the gaming podcast. And it looks like this is the pilot for all three right here.
There you go.
But we will circle back around to wrestling, and if you're listening to this episode and you don't like wrestling, I apologize. But I think there's a lot of things in improv that wrestling connects to. There's a lot of the showmanship, a lot of the audience interaction. It's not something I've often spoken about, just because a lot of people, unless they're big wrestling fans, they don't quite get wrestling. But I think one of the main sources where I've learned about doing improv comes from wrestling. And that's because when you watch a pro wrestling event, you have an audience. It's performed in the round. They're in a ring, but it's their stage, and they are performing in the round, and you get to see what they do and how audience react. And I think that's a hell of a thing you can learn from. When people do something, you can see how the audience respond. And there's a lot that if you pay attention to it, you can learn, right, if I do this, you can learn a lot of the psychology. It does carry over, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I think one thing that, we concentrate a lot for, I think improv in general, because even though, Josh and I are 2 of 4 captains for our Breakfast Anytime crew, I also do some dinner theater style improv acting with another group here in Indianapolis as well. And I think that regardless who you're doing improv with, having a strong point of view is really key to being successful in the I guess, ironically speaking here, in the ring of improv acting. And in wrestling, that's all they are, is strong point of views. When you see Randy Orton in the ring, you're not going to see a flimsy Randy Orton character. He is going to go out there and he's going to do what he does. And if you have a good heel, or you have a good face, they're going to come out and they're going to be that, a good face. Hulk Hogan is going to always be that stalwart character who, take your vitamins, eat your breakfast, say your prayers, Hulkamania. And, The Undertaker, who's kind of always on the fringe, is always going to be the rest in peace constantly, or Kane or any of those characters. Like,
they have very defined roles,
yes,
and they're very strong characters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to improv, you can't have someone that's a bit of this, a bit wishy-washy that. You need to establish a character fast, and you need to do it with a bold choice.
And I think that's, improv speaking and acting speaking and wrestling speaking, I think that's where a lot of the failures that you see in something like that comes from not having a strong point of view with your character. I mean, you look at guys who are fantastic in the ring. Like I can remember, Evan Bourne, when Evan Bourne was wrestling, he was insane, an aerialist like no other, but he had no character. Like there was nothing pushing him narratively to that next level. It was just, wow, this guy can flip and he's got crazy spots and he's insane and he can take an RKO better than just about anybody. But that was it. Like that was a very one-dimensional flat character. Whereas, in improv acting, you have to make strong choices and you have to have a strong point of view and you have to be able to develop with a partner or with multiple partners, whether it's long form or short form. Sorry, excuse me.
Long shorm?
Long shorm.
Long shorm. Yeah, I agree. Okay.
Yeah.
So, guys, I'm going to ask you a few questions specifically about improv, and we'll circle back to gaming. Don't think we've forgotten that for a moment. But when it comes to improv, what would you say individually you find the most challenging thing?
Voices.
Different accents, impressions, that kind of thing?
We're from Indiana, and I had this conversation with somebody when my wife and I were on vacation at Disney. We were standing next to a couple of guys from a guy and his wife from Scotland, and they were talking about, and I asked them where they were from, and they talked about the different accents and dialogues or whatever there, and I'm like, well, when you look at the United States, those of us that are in Indiana have the most neutral of the accents, right. Whereas it's very clear if you're from the north of the United States, the east, west, or south from you, it's very clear where those of us in Indiana, relatively natural, what you would call an American accent. Yeah. But for me, getting outside of that is like near impossible because I've trained myself for 30 some odd years to speak like this. Yeah. Trying to get me to speak like something else, I look like an idiot.
Right.
I think when it comes to like accents and improv, I don't think there's like a massive expectation that things are going to be just right. As long as you can give a sense of like the voice you're doing. Like when I'm doing an improv show, because obviously I'm in Britain and I have to put on an American accent, and this might be interesting for you guys. I think I know what a New York accent is, and then I know that there's like a New Jersey one, which to me is kind of the same thing. Then I know that there's going to be like a Southern States or Texas accent, and then there'll be, is it like the, I'm trying to think what else the other ones. Is it like a Boston accent's quite a distinct one, and there might be one or two others, but for the most part, it will just do an accent, and it'll be vaguely American. And if there's anyone American in the audience, they'll be vaguely offended, slightly amused at just how wrong it all is.
Yeah, I would agree. I think accents are never anything that I'm afraid of. I do a few really good accents, and then I have some that I'm all right with, and then there are some that I'm just complete garbage with. But I think for myself, when it comes to accent work, we play a game called that we call Office Party or Cocktail Party. And the whole idea is to come in with a funny voice or with a different characteristic to your voice, and that doesn't necessarily have to cater to an accent per se. It can just be, if you talk in a very strange monotone voice, or if you talk like a robot, or
so like how the Muppets don't necessarily have a regional accent, but they've got a weird voice.
Right, absolutely, yeah. It's that sort of that's kind of the shtick to that game. I would have to say for myself, when it comes to a weakness that I have in doing a game, sometimes solidifying the relationship with someone in a scene, where if it's a completely blank scene and there's no suggestion from the audience, or maybe you're playing like we play.
I'm just getting a slight bit of interference there. I might ask you to repeat it, because that is your fantastic robot accent.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. So, sorry, just repeat that last sentence.
No, it's okay. I was just saying that, in general, trying to find a good ground to build a scene off of. You want to try and get your who are you, where are you, and why are you there as quickly as possible in a scene so that you can build off of that. That can sometimes get in the way because, as an improv actor, you got 52,000 ideas popping into your head as to what's going to happen, but you kind of also have to rely on your partners. And being able to be open to that suggestion from whether it be the audience or your partner or what have you, can be a little bit of a struggle sometimes, especially if you are trying to jump the gun and you're not listening to your partner. That can be a struggle for me at times.
Yes, absolutely. Listening, whenever I'm directing, I will say, listen to each other. The clues of what you can bounce off of are all going to be in what the other person's given you. But okay, so that comes on to, is there the thing you're most confident in, or a game or a skill where it's like, yes, I get to do this in this game. This is going to be good.
Well, we do a lot of poetry style games in our show, which I really love because we mix it up. So one of the poetry styles that we do is like free form gibberish poetry, where we'll have one person who's doing some sort of strange gibberish language, and then the other person who's interpreting for them. I really love playing that game. It's a lot of fun. And as long as you, again, going back to strong point of view, as long as you are committing to it, you can be as strange as you want. You can be off the wall. You can get up. You can move through the audience, and just have the weirdest sounding gibberish. And as long as whoever is with you is committed to your same point of view, you guys can take the room by storm. And I love playing that kind of game. And also accents.
Okay, cool. So guys, let's as promised, let's circle back round to gaming just for a little bit. Improv games is a great way of playing games, a great way of play. Let's talk a little bit more video games. So similar to the approach of wrestling, what's favorite console, favorite games? Let's learn a little bit more. Go ahead.
Well, this is the one part where Don and I always I won't say we're at odds, but we definitely I am a PlayStation 4 player. I have been part of the Sony universe of consoles since PlayStation 1. That said, I own a PlayStation 4 Pro, an Xbox One X, and a Nintendo Switch, and like every classic console mini that recently came out. So it's not, I'm not so dedicated, but I primarily am a PlayStation player, and I'm currently playing Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is so good. As a wrestling fan, I have WWE 2K20. I also have Madden NFL 20.
Did you experience any of the famous glitches with that?
I did.
Melting?
I did.
You did.
And some of them are hilarious. But they are, I'll give 2K credit for, they are trying to get whatever they can fixed. And if anybody actually steps back and understands what happened with Visual Concepts taking over 2K, the 2K development, and WWE kind of forcing, like, this is going to come out because we said it was going to come out, they kind of got put in a rock and a hard place situation, and it went out with bugs. And they're trying to fix it.
So is the conspiracy theory there that, was it Ukes that were the previous developer? Is the suspicion that they're secretly going off to develop the AEW game?
Well, I don't know about the AEW game, but they did express interest in working on another wrestling game. I do know that came out. It could very well be AEW because Kenny Omega is the super gamer, and which, by the way, I met him after AEW Dynamite.
So jealous. We parked on opposite sides of the hall, and I went towards my van, and literally as I'm walking, I can see my van. I'm 20 feet away from it, and I look at my phone. It goes off. He sends me a picture. He's standing next to Kenny Omega, and not only that, but I think he may have been one of only a handful of people. Josh, this is one of only a handful of people that had a replica AEW Heavyweight Championship belt with him. So he's standing there in a picture with his belt and Kenny Omega, and I was like, there was something telling me I needed to walk you guys back to your van, and I'm so mad at myself for not doing it.
So yeah, I'm a PlayStation player.
That's cool. I would have to say I'm a heavy Xbox mark. PlayStation 2 was the last Sony console that I purchased, and coincidentally, the first console that I purchased with my own money. I was growing up. I was a big Nintendo gamer. Still am. I own an original NES, an original SNES. I'm in the market for a 64. I think I'll probably stop. Boy? Not yet. No, man. I'm not looking to kill my eyeballs. I played that thing enough to know not to play it any longer.
See, the Virtual Boy never came out in the UK.
Oh, really?
This year, I'm 34. When I was 33, I decided, you know what? I'm in a position where I can afford. There's eBay. I'm going to get one. There's only 12 games or something, but I'm going to get one, and I ordered one. Second time I used it, the left eye went completely dead on me.
From what I've heard, it's actually better to play not with the 3D.
Yeah, absolutely. But especially in this day and age of virtual realities and Oculus, I'll go that route before I go back to Virtual Boy. But that was a fun console. I actually grew up with a friend who had one and played a Mario game on it. Or maybe it was tennis. A Wario. There was a Wario game that was a side scroller.
Yeah, Wario. It was just Wario Virtual Land. Oh, I've got it somewhere near me. I can't find it, but Virtual Boy Wario Land or something like this. Yeah. So that's actually a good game.
Yeah, that was probably the best game on that console. But in general, I'm definitely a Microsoft mark. And again, I think when Josh and I talk about it, we joke around about him being a Sony mark, me being a Microsoft mark, but I think it always comes down to exclusives. He's an Uncharted guy. I'm a Halo fan. So and outside of that, I'll play whatever controller you want to hand me. I'm in.
Yeah. See, I'd quite agree with that. And the interesting thing of this dynamic is I like all of the games, but my primary console at the moment is a Switch. So yeah. And I've always lent more towards Nintendo games. So I've got my PS4. I haven't got a Pro, and I haven't got an Xbox One X. But I've got all three of the major platforms, and I like to dance between them. Mostly I play Nintendo, but then occasionally there'll be a Resident Evil 2 that I've got to go back to.
I'm highly considering getting a Switch.
The Switch Lite's a really good deal, unless you really want to play on your TV.
I want multiplayer. I don't want.
Well, you get that with the Lite, but
yeah, I know. But my children don't like to share as it is.
Got it.
So I would prefer to just be able to have enough controllers for everyone to sit on the couch and play together.
Understand.
But no, when I saw the new Pokemon Sword and Shield, I've always been a big Pokemon fan. I've played Pokemon since Gen 1. And when I saw Sword and Shield, I was like, oh, man. The Switch is definitely the Nintendo console I've always wanted them to make. And now that they have a really good-looking Pokemon game on it, and from what my 10-year-old tells me, it's actually set in more of a, European setting versus,
It is. It's actually based on Great Britain this time.
Yeah. So I'm really looking into possibly going that route before I get an Xbox. Because I figure, once the newest Microsoft
Scarlet's
console...
coming out in the holidays.
That's what I was going to say, man. Once the Scarlet comes out, those Xbox Ones will be going off the shelf like nobody's business.
That said, they were $199 this weekend.
I know they were.
$149 for the one without the disc, which don't...
I'm not getting the digital. No, there's no way I'm getting the digital.
Sorry.
I heart my hardware more than anything, so...
Do you like collecting games, then?
I do. I love being able to set my Assassin's Creed cases next to each other and just kind of, yeah. Those are mine.
Yeah.
Like, I have those.
Yeah.
So
I had done all of that, and then it reached the point because I'm like, yeah. So you'll appreciate like the nerd stuff, but like going back in time, I'd gone through every console. I've got the original. I've got everything Nintendo probably ever put out. I might not have a DSi, but like I've got a DS. I've got a 3DS. I've got a Game Boy, and I do actually have a Game Boy Light, but I might not have every iteration as long as it plays the games.
Right.
And then there's like things. Did you ever play an Amiga? Did that ever come out in the United States? An Amiga, Commodore Amiga?
We had a lot of Commodores, but I don't remember the Commodore. I know what you're talking about because
or the Atari ST or stuff like this. So there were these. They're like PCs but different operating systems. But they were contemporaries. They were like 16-bit. Came out in the late 80s. And they'd like how you get old school PC games in these massive cardboard boxes, and we'd have all of these games, and they just reached the point where it's like I don't get to play any of these anymore. These like the machines have long since been packed away. Yeah. And then I looked up at my Xbox games and my PS2 games. I was like, well, they're just DVD cases. So I went through a process of just taking all of the sleeves out of the cases, and then I've got just about 3 boxes of all of the covers, and then I've got DVD holders that have got all of the game discs in them. But I can't have them on the shelves anymore because I was never the child that would actually sell these and part exchange them for to get new ones. It'd be like, well, no, I could play this later. And so the thing that had to go in the end was the actual DVD jewel cases and stuff.
Yeah, and actually, I definitely live to that sentiment as well. Josh, not so much. Josh is definitely a trade-in and move to the next. I mean, he's still definitely...
The only reason I have been doing that recently is because the backwards compatibility thing for Sony.
Oh, yeah.
Which, goodness gracious, they would have fixed that on the PlayStation 5, but that's a whole other conversation. But since I still have a working Fat Boy PS3 sitting upstairs...
Yeah.
Original with the PlayStation 2 backwards compatibility, even though I have like one PlayStation 2 game.
But you know what? When they, I didn't get the PS3 when it first came out because it was incredibly expensive.
Yes, it was.
But as soon as they announced that we're tweaking it, we're taking out a couple of USB ports, and we're also removing the PlayStation 2 backwards compatibility, that was the day I rushed and got one of the last few that would actually play the backwards compatible games.
It was a crazy decision on their part, but I know that it was a cost because they were selling, even at the $599, the PS3 that originally came out, they were losing $100 per console at the time because of that cell processor they decided to do in it. I'm so glad we moved on to that.
It's crazy that they thought that, well, we can do this at a loss. And I suppose they're dominated with the PS1 and PS2. They probably just thought, we'll keep dominating, and then make it out on the software. But crazy business decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they fixed it with the PS4, though.
Right, and then Xbox decided to come out with, what was it, HD disc or whatever.
Oh, the HD DVD.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Bleh.
So, weird fact on that, and this is just the same thing happened with Beta and VHS. The reason why HD DVD lost is because the porn industry went Blu-ray.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, that makes sense.
Like it or not, whatever your opinions on that industry is.
That is your random fact of the day. On that note, let's circle back round to improv away from porn. Just for a moment. And, okay, so improv. What would you say is an example of either the best advice or some really good advice you've been given to perform improv better?
Get out of your head. I know that seems like a very generic statement, but it's the one that has stuck with me. Literally, the first weekend we did our improv workshops. I'm 6'3", 350 pounds. And I'm a big dude. I'm standing up. I'm trying to do these things, and I catch myself staring up at the ceiling, trying to think up something. And Peter Spellos, who at the time was 62, 61, something along those lines, 6'2", 320 pounds. So one of the few people that I spend any time with that can look me eye to eye, is standing behind me, and I turn around, and he's staring at me eye to eye, and he goes, "Get out of your head!" And just from that point on, it's stuck with me. Is that's probably the most important thing I've been told about improv. Sometimes it's just a matter of react, because your brain's going to cause you to slow down, and you need to understand that your brain is smarter than you think it is. Let it react. I was like, "What? Okay." So that's always stuck with me.
Yeah, no, that's very good advice. How about yourself, Don?
I would have to say, because I tend to be especially when performing, especially when it comes to doing improv, I tend to be a ball of energy. I tend to be kind of all over the place, very reminiscent of, a Chris Farley type of character, just somebody who loves to just come at everything full bore. And I think that probably the best advice that I got, and I can't remember the specific words used, but the spirit of it was basically, allow yourself to be involved in the scene and not so much involved in your own energy.
Interesting, yeah.
Like, because I tend to be somebody who, I love being able to add. I love to add on. I love to be able to add on to whatever's happening in the situation or the scene or the character or whatever's going on. But I also tend to get away with, and I guess cheat a little bit, because I am so energetic and I can be really silly and really funny about things. And so that can carry me through a difficult scene, but being more genuine and kind of taking myself back and observing what's going on instead of just coming at it, like a bulldozer through the middle of, Manhattan or something like that, just kind of crazy, moving stuff out of the way. I think that's probably the best advice that I have gotten.
Okay, yeah. Good stuff. How about, guys, what's either the weirdest place that you've done improv or the strangest event, that's something that's happened on stage, something unexpected, or what's the anecdote you can always go back to?
Probably the most unexpected thing that I can remember last year around this weekend, we were doing a show at a small convention here in Indianapolis called Starbase Indy, and it's a Star Trek and sci-fi convention. And the stage we were actually doing it on the main stage, and the stage normally that we're on is just a big open platform stage. And this one happened to have a big set piece on it. And I don't remember who it was, if it was Martin or Leonard, but somebody in one of the scenes, they were doing something and they ended up falling down in the scene or something along those lines, hit the back set piece, and literally I watched the entire wall sway back and sway forward, like the whole set piece was, because it was all bracketed together. Yeah. And I mean, we're talking like a 25-foot long set piece on this stage, permanent set piece. It looked like the bridge of the Enterprise. Yeah. And I watched this whole set piece move with a vengeance, and I thought this whole thing was coming down on top of us. So that was probably one of the most eventful things that I've seen unexpectedly in an improv show.
For me, I'm going to have to go with Gen Con this year, because our show was scheduled from 7 to 9, yeah. And we were under the impression, incorrectly, that we were going to have at least 5-10 minutes to go in, set the room. Well, the trivia thing that was going on before us went over. So we got in there, and we had to quickly tear down a couple, 3 tables off stage, move a couple microphones, whatever. And we had probably 60, 70 people, ready and raring to go for the show. And we just kind of had to pull it off or whatever. We ultimately took these tables and just kind of chucked them out in the hallway, which resulted in the Gen Con volunteer staff coming in to almost shut us down, I guess.
Wow. Because
we had put these tables out in the hallway instead of up against the back wall, and our director handled it, good, bad, whatever, it was handled.
Yeah. He had come in unexpectedly. Like, he like, it was unexpected to me because
Yeah.
it was kind of behind the scenes. But originally, he wasn't planning on coming in August for Gen Con because he had hip replacement surgery in April and was going to take that whole summer off for physical therapy, and then
Go to TF
Nation was, I think, the next weekend or
Something
maybe
like
a week and a half later. He was going to be in London, so he was going to be on a 12-hour flight from New York to London. Now, he lives in New York, so that's not really a big commute, but basically he was flying in for 2 days to be here in Indianapolis for that show at Gen Con, and I didn't know about it, and so it was just, I mean, it was kismet that he was even here because he handled it while we were in the middle of our show, and we didn't know anything about it until... the show was over and the audience had left, and he walked up and he said, "Hey, that was a great show, by the way."
So we almost got kicked out of our favorite convention performing for the first time.
Yeah.
So that was
wow.
That was fun.
Quite a thing. Okay, so guys, next up, what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to put you to a new segment that we're doing on the show. It's an idea that I've had for a while. And frankly, just in the last couple of conversations I've had on the podcast, I have plain forgotten to do it. But it has come to my mind here. It's one of the games that we do in Extreme Improv when we have our live shows. And the idea to adapt it to the podcast here is that it will be something where it's a challenge for each of you to do. And then at the end of like this season, we'll see who's actually done the best, and we'll like have like a little rankings table. And what it is what we call an extreme monologue. So individually, it's a monologue that we're going to ask you to do. However, the length of this monologue will come down to your ability to stick within the rules. And we can all police each other on the rules here. But the idea is that when you perform the monologue, you're not allowed to repeat any words whatsoever. And you're also not allowed to hesitate, which we count as an extended pause, or saying things like or Here in the UK, we have a radio show called Just a Minute, which has similar but slightly more relaxed rules. So are you up for it, first of all?
Certainly up for it. The struggle I see with that is words like a and the and
Yes.
and those are common words
They
that you
are
can't
common words.
not
So-
repeat.
Yes, I completely agree. And like we've been playing this game in our show for at least a year, and probably a year and a half. And the thing is that we will still find that we repeat the word I or the. But you like after this podcast, like we can have you back on the show another time, and you'll have practiced, because I am throwing you in the deep end here. This is true improv at its purest. But you'll come back and you'll have learn some extra strategies. But if you're game and willing to be the first victims of this on the show, then we can have a go at this.
Yes, and
I was going to say, I think we'd be horrible improv actors if we said no now.
Well, you could do. I always give people the option to veto something. If we're doing a game and we get a suggestion that someone has to play Hitler or has to play something like a mass shooting or something, I'll look to the performer, and if they give me the look in their eye of like, we want something else, then I might give that opportunity. But okay, so with our mutual interests in both gaming and wrestling, I think we'll use those as the topics for each of you guys. So, who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, Don. Don, you can go first. Now,
Okay.
I've got a stopwatch here, and the length of time that you're performing this monologue is strictly down to your ability to not break the rules of not repeating any words whatsoever, or not having what we would deem to be an extended pause, like a hesitation. So saying things like or is a hesitation or an extended pause. Now, if I notice you break either of those rules, or if you notice him break either of those rules, we can just call freeze, and if we are correct, I'll stop the timer. If we're correct, then that's you done. That's the end of it, and we'll see what your timing is, and then we'll put this onto the ranking leaderboards, and we'll see where we are like by the end of the season. So, Josh, let's say you are going to discuss pro wrestling. That is your subject, and your minute will begin now.
So I enjoy pro wrestling because great characters can have really good monologues. As a matter of fact, one of the best monologues I've ever heard was one from Chris.
Freeze.
Yeah,
Did we
freeze.
get
Yeah,
monologues?
I heard monologues.
Repetition
Shoot.
of
Yep.
the monologues.
Yep.
Oh,
And that was Dawn, by the way.
Yeah.
That was Dawn.
That was Dawn. Okay, so Dawn, you went first, and your timing for this, and I can check this later on the actual recording if it comes down to being precise, but it's 16.51 seconds.
That's more than I thought. Okay.
Okay.
That's tough.
It is a tough one.
It's the idea of monologuing, but not saying the same word.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like, okay, so perhaps like the tip I can give in between here, and so Josh, this may give you a distinct advantage, or it might throw you with instructions that just then completely throws you off. is to use your mental thesaurus. So if you were speaking about professional wrestling, then it's about finding the other ways of saying the same thing. So wrestling and wrestling are technically two different words. The squared circle, a ring. You know, there's different ways of saying the same thing, and that's often the biggest tip I can give players of this game, to find the different ways of saying the same thing, because that way you can get yourself out of a pickle. So, Josh, we're now going to come on to the subject of video games. And I'm going to reset the timer. And I would like you to speak on the subject of video games in this game of Extreme Monologue. Here you go.
Video games provide many years of entertainment for all ages. Software developers show different images in such a way that you can manipulate the environment around you. The people...
sorry, that is a repetition. The
Did I say
environment
people
around...
again?
Oh, you said the word you twice.
Said you twice.
Oh, fudge razzler.
And again, I can check this for the precise timing, because there's not much in it, but from that, I gather that you were 15.85 seconds.
Really?
Yeah. So, technically, from this being the first time we've done this in this form on the show, Don, you were winning. You were at the top of the leaderboard.
Woo!
And Josh, you were at the bottom of the leaderboard, but it's only 2 so far.
Right where I like it.
Yeah.
On the bottom.
Okay, fantastic, guys. Okay, we'll begin to start wrapping things up. We've got segued onto wrestling and video games multiple times here, but I'm going to ask a few more quick-fire questions and perhaps a little bit of word association thrown in there. And so, quick-fire question, each of you. What are you passionate about?
Music.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to go with probably gaming right now.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Just to expand on those ever so quickly, what kind of music are you into?
I listen to quite literally pretty much any genre of music. I'm also next to all of my other performing and things that I get into, I actually lead music at my church and have been a vocal performer since about the age of 6. So,
wow, fantastic. Okay, and just to ask another related question there on gaming, Josh, what's the worst video game you've ever played?
The worst video game I've ever played. I'm trying to think. There have been a couple here recently. I didn't even bother. This is going to sound absolutely terrible because from a dramatic and presentation and everything associated with it, the Metal Gear Solid 4, I think it was, the Phantom Pain, maybe it's Metal Gear Solid 5. I don't remember the exact numeral on it. It was an absolutely incredible game, and I hope I never play it again because it was one of the last PlayStation 3 games. It was multiple discs, and it literally has 30-minute load time between each chapter.
Oh, that's garbage.
And I'm like, that took so much away from me in that whole experience that I was glad things changed. Just to kind of add on to the gaming element myself, I'm also I'm surrounded by board games. And we're also big into role-playing games, Pathfinder, Dungeons & Dragons, different things along those lines. And he mentioned that worship leading, and I'm doing once a quarter, we're doing a game night here for our young adults at our church. They're coming over, and we're playing board games and doing silly things. So, but yeah, I'm going to have to go with any game that has a load time longer than a couple minutes.
Yeah. Okay, next question. What's the most unusual place you've ever visited? This could be a city that you've been to or an individual location.
I had family in Hazard, Kentucky.
Okay. I mean, Hazard sounds like, as in the Dukes of Hazzard?
I think so. I want to say there's a
Two
relationship
Z's?
there. No, just one.
Okay.
No, so in parts of Kentucky they have these areas that are called hollers, and the Hazard was a holler. And oddly enough, my sister-in-law had family
These are
from
all
there
fantastic words. Hollers meaning scream, hazards meaning, yeah.
too.
Oh my gosh.
But I had family there. I had
That's
literally have a
great.
great grandparent who's buried there. So
That's great. Oh.
follow that.
Yeah, that's hard to follow. Gosh. One of the weirdest places I've ever been. I don't know. So my brother and I are both Masons, and we've been to some strange, like, Masonic halls and Masonic museums and stuff like that. That's probably the closest I can come up with a strange place. I've never been into some weird cave or, in Holler, Kentucky.
Okay. All right, guys. Next question. Favorite movie?
Oh,
That was,
wow.
kind of hurts sometimes, doesn't it?
If there was one movie, this is kind of the way that I have to define it in my head. If there was one movie that I could watch for the rest of my life, and it was the only movie I could ever watch,
Interesting.
because that would be the favorite movie for me.
Yeah.
Man, I'm gonna. Oh God!
Oh,
Dang
just before you answer that, does a qualification like that on a question, does that actually give you the true answer though? Because, like, if I bring it back to video games, much to the derision of anyone who doesn't like video games listening, and then we keep circling back there.
Yeah, right.
If I could only play one video game ever again, and I have thought about this, in my head, I was like, well, what are my favourites? What ones do I rate the highest? And then I think, well, it might end up being something like Tetris, just because you can always keep picking it up and using it. But if it was like, what's my favourite game? I might come to my head of something like, I love Resident Evil 2, I love Resident Evil 4, I love Donkey Kong Country. But if I could only ever play Donkey Kong Country ever again, I think I'd get bored of it within about 2 weeks.
That's a very good point.
I actually have my answer.
Go
I
for
do.
it, Josh.
And it's because of what he just described. I think that Beetlejuice is one of the most classic comedy. Oh my goodness, Michael Keaton. Because I was a Batman fan also, and just knowing that, it's so incredibly entertaining every time I see it.
You know
Did
what?
you ever watch the Beetlejuice cartoon?
Yes,
I did.
absolutely.
I
As
love
good and as
that
bad
show.
as it was, very much enjoyed it.
Absolutely, I loved that cartoon. So taking your suggestion at heart, the very first answer that popped into my head when you asked the question was The Princess Bride.
Amazing movie.
Yeah.
Amazing movie.
It's
Yeah.
quotable. I can watch it a million times and love it every time. It has everything you need in a good movie.
The
Yeah.
sad thing, I was almost there with the movie Clueless. Did you ever see that? Clueless?
I've not seen
Rolling
Clueless.
with the homies.
Oh.
Yes, I've seen that
I don't
movie.
know that one.
When I was in high school, I was dating a girl and she was watching it, and I heard it in the background over the phone, and I heard a couple lines of dialogue, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I was able to pinpoint where they were in the movie.
But you know what? Like, there are films where I can do that. There are sometimes I will just hear a music cue and I'll be like, is that the Shawshank Redemption on, or something like this?
Oh, yeah.
And yeah. Okay, so
That
sorry,
happened to
go
me
ahead.
That happened to me just the other day. So we were doing a fundraiser for my old high school's theater department, which is what Josh was referring to earlier about doing the show in the high school. And our director, Peter, was here, and he put a bunch of music cues into the show because we actually did 2 nights of one acts and then 1 night of improv. And one of the music cues was...
I think we're just a little bit losing. We're getting a little bit robot voice there again.
All right.
Sorry, if you could just repeat that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in our fundraising show that we did a few weeks ago at the beginning of November, one of the music cues, because you mentioned music cues and picking something up from a movie that you had seen, one of the music cues we used was the final orchestral swell of the movie Abyss. If you've ever seen the movie Abyss, there's this just killer ending sequence where they're coming out of the water and there's this gorgeous music going on. And he started playing it, and I was
Spoiler
like,
alert.
Oh, yeah. I think that movie's about 30 years old.
Yeah.
But it was so funny because I looked at him and I said, man, this music reminds me so much, and I haven't seen this movie in years. But I was like, it reminds me so much of that last scene in The Abyss, and he turns his computer and shows me the title, and I was like, yes! And it was exactly that music. And so, I love that stuff.
Okay, and who is your comedy or just acting heroes or the person you look up to inspiration-wise?
Robin Williams, Red Skelton, and the Marx Brothers.
I'm surprised you didn't say Three Stooges.
Three Stooges are in there, but the difficult thing about that is with Marx Brothers and Three Stooges, I spent about equal amounts of time with them, and And
Marx Brothers, they mix it up. They're a vaudevillian, whereas Three Stooges just smash each other in the face with frying pans.
I love Red Skelton because he was a local boy, and all the stuff he did was a lot of fun. But Robin Williams, I mean, they just released a Life magazine for Robin Williams that Deb bought for me. So,
I would have to say, acting, improv inspirations. Ironically enough. Probably guys like Chris Farley, Chris Jericho, that can just roll with anything. The Rock is probably one of the greatest improv dudes I've ever seen in my life. Oh man, I'd have to if I could think of just kind of narrowing it down. There's a bunch of people I just love to watch and just to watch how creative they can be, but. Rick Moranis is another guy that I love watching because he's just so silly.
Yeah.
Anyhow,
Rick Moranis. What was Rick? I can't quite remember. Who is Rick Moranis? I know the name. Is he in Ghostbusters?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I know Rick Moranis. Oh, gosh. I haven't... What happened to Rick Moranis? He kind of disappeared, didn't he?
His wife passed away. His wife passed away, and they had children, and he decided to set the acting game aside and take care of his family. Because
interesting story.
Right, I think he had made enough money with the movies that he had been in, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and
Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
And then Ghostbusters and stuff, that he was actually able to kind of step away for a while, take care of his family. And then I'm assuming that he probably did odd jobs and stuff like that on the side. And I think that there were talks that they were trying to get him in a cameo for the most recent Ghostbusters movie with the ladies, which Melissa McCarthy, and now that they're all rolling into Kate McKinnon and all them,
However, they may also be trying to do it with Ghostbusters 2020 also. So we'll see.
Paul Rudd's in that, right?
Yeah.
He was in Clueless. Hey,
I'm gonna have to watch Clueless now.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do a quick little bit of word association. So just say the first thing that comes to your head here. So, improv.
Shop.
Fun.
What was that word?
Fun.
Okay, cool.
F-U-N.
I thought I had Viagra. I'm not even joking. Okay. Next word is block.
Party.
Lego.
Ah, interesting. Okay, improv-related word. Stage.
Actor.
Right.
Okay. Sega.
Games.
Genesis.
Yeah. Sega. Okay. The Iron Sheik.
Wrestler.
Sabu. I know he was the original Sheik, not Iron, but it was still the first thing came to mind.
Yep. Okay. Mistake.
Wrong.
Right now, my mind just totally went blank.
Okay, and last one to end on is Montreal.
Canada.
Screw job.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I was looking for.
He just
Okay.
softball.
Okay, so last thing I'll say, guys, is there anything in particular either that you can throw a question back to me if there's anything you'd like to ask me, or is there anything in particular that you'd like us to have covered on the show that we haven't covered today?
Well, I think that as good podcast hosts, we'd have to ask you a question that you have asked us. Who is your favorite wrestler?
Okay, interesting question. Favorite wrestler? Contenders for it are probably my favorites growing up were Hulk Hogan, but I was a massive fan of Bret Hart. I was like throughout the mid 90s up through to like the late 90s. I was definitely a fan of the Hitman, and to the point that when the Montreal Screwjob did happen and he went across to WCW, I was like, I'm sticking with Bret. And WCW wasn't all that good then. It started really on its downward swing. It was like my affiliation, my affection swapped sides always to the underdog. So that the WWE, the WWF at the time, was losing the ratings war. And it started getting hot, and there was the fantastic storyline with the Hart Foundation being anti-American. Of course, the British Bulldog was there, so I was a big fan of the Bulldog. Mm-hmm. And then when all of that happened with the Montreal Screwjob, and like Bret and Davey Boy and Neidhart went across to WCW, I was like, well, they were always saying about, we're sticking for what's right and stuff like that and respect. And I was like, yeah, like, how could they do this to Bret? But then, like, within about a year, WCW just kind of imploded, and there was, like, storylines where you'd have dog versus cat, and and that was a genuine match they had on Nitro.
Oh, yeah.
More recently, though, I'm a huge AJ Styles fan. I love AJ Styles. I've been a big fan of Kenny Omega. It was actually only a couple of years ago when Jericho was going across to New Japan to have his match Alpha versus Omega, where I really started watching the back history of Omega stuff, because obviously I'd been a fan of AJ Styles, and so when he'd gone to Bullet Club and everything, I had the awareness, but it really was that kind of stuff with Jericho that brought me in over there. Anyone else? Gosh, probably, but no one's that's coming to mind. But probably the ones, Shawn Michaels, of course, and I've always been of the opinion that with everything I said about Bret Hart, as much as I love Bret Hart, I could appreciate Shawn Michaels as much as a performer. And so when you have these behind the scenes things, to me, I always try to judge people by their performance in the ring. And like, I was a huge Chris Benoit fan, and that's kind of like the heartbreaking thing where the true life story overshadows how good he was in the ring. But I always think that, well, I can still talk about the performance with that and separate that a little bit there,
I would agree with you on that one, but that's a podcast conversation for another
Absolutely.
day.
Okay,
that's big. Yeah, go ahead.
One controversial follow-up question for the three of us.
Yes.
Oh boy.
Favorite world championship belt?
What design you mean?
Yes.
Oh, it's the Winged Eagle all day for me.
Yes. Winged Eagle.
All day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
See,
that's the one that Bret had. That's the one that Hogan had for a lot of the time. Yeah.
I'm an undisputed era big belt. That's my belt.
So the undisputed title or the big gold?
No, the undisputed title.
Okay.
Well, the Brock Championship, basically.
Yes.
Brock, Eddie, and Hogan.
That is my least favorite. I prefer the spinning. I prefer the spinner anytime. That one, the shape of it is wrong. It's dark. It has an eagle on it, but its wings are pointed down.
Yeah. What do you think of the current title? So AEW World Championship and the WWE, because the WWE and SmackDown Championship are the same belt, different colors.
Well, now it's got the Fiend on it, hasn't it? So.
Well, that's only if the Fiend is carrying it, because remember, Bray has his own. Yeah, that's how this worked out.
Well,
If I could have my own title, he should get one too.
Yeah.
Do you remember I think it was in TNA, Jeff Hardy had a world championship that had his face on that other people just continued winning for a little while.
You mean the one that looked like one of the characters from Masters of the Universe?
Yeah, exactly. That's the one. Okay, the AEW title, I love it. I think there's a lot of inspiration from the from New Japan Pro Wrestling's championship, which is a belt I love. I was in Japan last year, and much to my girlfriend's dismay, I made us go to the official New Japan Pro Wrestling shop. And one of the things I bought there, I'm not even 100% sure what it is. It's like a miniature championship, which I often wear like a wristwatch, but it's not a watch. But I think that's a really good design of a title.
That's great.
I think part of the reason why the AEW has a lot of those classics to it is because Dave Milliken, who is one of the co-designers along with Reggie Parks that did the Winged Eagle, Dave did the AEW title. So
cool.
Yeah, and he was there at All Out Weekend to present it to the members of the Elite or whenever they presented it. So that was pretty cool. Sorry, another small fact. I collect replicas.
No, it's great. Yeah.
Did you say sort of?
I only have first off, the guy I just recently bought this AEW from, okay, I've got 12 belts.
Uh-huh.
This guy says he went from 15 to 106.
Well, it's probably because he has belts from,
Okay, so
New Japan and Ring of Honor and... Yeah,
I'm not a collector. I have a few.
So here's a little bit of info that will connect a little bit to this thread for you guys. So in the Extreme Improv live shows, it's a competitive improv show. So I can truthfully say that some of the influence of when I created it was originally called Extreme Championship Improv. It was only ever meant to originally be a one-off show. And the thing that people liked most about it is that it would be competitive and we would battle over a championship. And when I realized that people liked the format, and I was like, okay, so we're just going to keep running with this format. We ended up getting rid of the word championship just because for Twitter and everything, it's a very long word. But we've always retained that you win a championship belt, and the original championship belt, because it was only ever meant to be a one-off show that would have had 4 performances and then it would have been done. But I realized that we needed to get a better looking design. So there's the company in the United States called Undisputed Belts, and from them I ordered a blank championship, and it cost a fortune, especially to get it shipped to the UK. And then I've engraved this belt to be like a one of a kind. Obviously, it's their classic design of the shape of everything, but there is a Extreme Improv Championship belt, and that is the one championship belt I've got. And sometimes I will just wear it around the house.
I'm in the.
That's fantastic.
I'm in the process of having the gentleman that manufactured the AEW title I have. I'm in the process of working out a custom design with him for our podcast just to have at the conventions because I want to have one.
You should have everybody on the podcast sign it.
No, I think that definitely don't have any regrets with that. Just get a championship for yourself. Everyone should have one.
Everyone should have one.
Okay, guys, this has been fantastic. Where can we find out more about you guys? What's your plugs? What is the podcasts? Where do you do improv? What's the links and all this good stuff? So, you can check out The Established Facts at theestablishedfacts.com. We are also on Twitter at INDYTEF, NDTEF. We're on Facebook at The Established Facts. Our podcast is on almost every platform that was free for us to use, between iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, I think we got joined up on. I know we're on Google Podcasts. You can find us there. In terms of Breakfast Anytime, we are primarily on Facebook right now. You can find our Facebook page through Breakfast Anytime, though a website has been purchased and is on a hosted server but not been put out there yet.
Yeah.
Thanks,
coming
Maggie.
soon.
Under construction.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
we do have video stuff on YouTube.
On YouTube, correct.
We do have video stuff on YouTube.
The Established Facts is on YouTube, but we're way behind on YouTube, so it's not a reliable source. But Breakfast Anytime, we actually have some of our improv shows on YouTube. You should be able to find us under Breakfast Anytime Improv. I believe that's everywhere. I think we're on Twitter, but I don't know if we've done anything with it.
Yeah.
So primarily our Facebook page for Breakfast Anytime Improv. The next time I think we're hoping to perform will be sometime in first quarter.
January or February.
Well, that's what we're aiming for, but we're definitely aiming to get at what is called HoosierCon here, which is a free gaming convention put on by the Hoosier Gamers nonprofit organization. We know a lot of friends that are there, and it's I think 2,000 to 3,000 people come to the convention.
Yeah, something like that.
We probably had 50 or 60 come to our show last year, and we're really excited to go back. So
yeah, it's a local free gaming convention, and they do all kinds of really fun charity work there as well. So
great, sounds good. Right, guys, this has been a lot of fun. So just to wrap things up from my end, if you're listening to this has been the Extreme Improv podcast. You can find all about Extreme Improv, where our live shows will be, where our podcasts, which are available on all of those kind of same platforms, iTunes, Podbean, Spreaker, Google, Alexa, anywhere you can find your favorite podcast will be there. And this is the Extreme Improv podcast, so please subscribe. Our website is www.extremeimprov.co.uk. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, all that good stuff. Always just search Extreme Improv. And this has been another bumper episode. This has been a lot of fun, so hopefully you'll all want to find out a lot more about the gaming side of things and the pro wrestling side of things. Guys, I would actually love to have you back because as alluded to earlier, I will have podcasts based on wrestling and stuff. So it'd be fun to dive more into the wrestling side of the chat and maybe the gaming side without the guilt in the back of my mind that this was meant to be about improv.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'd love to be on your podcast for sure for something like that. We'd love to have you on the Established Facts as well and hang out and talk about some gaming stuff. And
I would love that.
Great.
Yeah,
definitely let us
will
know
connect.
when this
We'll make
drops.
that happen.
Awesome.
Yeah, this will go out in a couple of weeks. So,
Great.
I will let you guys get back on with your Sunday. Thank you so much for your time. And I will message you. I'll connect with you on Facebook where I can as well. Just that way, when I put it up, you'll see all the links and so on and so forth.
Great.
That is perfect, and we'll cross-post it on our site so we get for one, it's a free episode for us, and two, that way we get everybody linked. So thanks a lot, David.
No worries.